Welcome back to yet another weekly video, and in this week's episode we're breaking down Summertime Flow McCoys Chute.
Don't tell me I should think otherwise. Take me with you to the sunrise.
What you have to understand is as the water drops and recedes, another half of the rapid emerges, and it really changes this rapid and becomes a much longer section of whitewater. And as that water recedes, the relationships with this rapid start to vary quite a bit. There are some paddlers that really love this rapid and want to run multiple laps here, and there are some paddlers that have a less than positive relationship with this rapid and literally just want to get it over with because it is the first rapid of the day on this whitewater stretch of the Ottawa River. And so this video, like always, is meant to be an educational resource. It's meant to help provide some additional perspective on this rapid and a unique eye-in-the-sky perspective, looking down just to understand more of what's happening with the rapid, where the water's going, and some tips and tricks along the way. We have a special guest this week as well. Benny Marr is actually going to be demoing the lines and providing us some hot tips along the way. So if you want to be more like Benny, stick around because we're going to start breaking it down right now.
I'm doing a little check, pow.
The eye in the sky has been engaged, and we are looking top down at McCoys Chute at -1 on the Shaggy Designs Ottawa River gauge. And as we look at this rapid, there are a lot of features. There's a lot going on here. And so what we need to do is we just need to go ahead and start naming off some of these features so we're all on the same page as we're talking about breaking down the different lines here. And on the top river left-hand side, I refer to this eddy as the Upper Sadler's eddy. On river right, I will also refer to this as the Upper Phil's eddy, and those correspond directly with the features that are downstream of them. On the river left-hand side, we have Sadler's. On the river right-hand side, we have Phil's Hole. Downstream of Sadler's on river left, I have the Lower Sadler's eddy. And then on river right, I refer to that eddy below Phil's as the Photo Video eddy. Within the commercial rafting and kayaking world, most of our video kayakers and photo kayakers will paddle through McCoy's, catch this eddy, hop up onto the rock there, and shoot photos and video of our guests coming through. Downstream of the photo video eddy, we have the corner wave, and then beside it, there is the corner wave eddy. Directly across from it, we have the 7-8 hole, and that corresponds with the football eddy. Downstream of football eddy, we have the horseshoe island, which corresponds directly with left side horseshoe and right side horseshoe. And then there is a tongue that leads downstream between the two of those, and it leads us into baby face wave. So there's a lot going on here. And what we have to do is we first have to take into account where the risks are in this rapid. And Sadler's and Phil's are both very big features, and specifically the Sadler's, right pit Sadler's and right pit Phil's, and I'll highlight those now, those are both more intimidating than their counterparts on the left. And they're both very much hydraulics, and there are some risks that to be taken into account when paddling into a hydraulic. Number one, if you don't have a lot of speed or if you have the wrong angle, you could end up surfing very quickly. And in both features, they have the ability to hold your boat. That being said, in both features, if you do what is necessary of a swimmer in a hydraulic, if you ball up and go deep, both of those features will let you go. Keep in mind, though, is the real hazard that we have to talk about is not actually at the top of the rapid, it's actually at the bottom, and it's Horseshoe Island. And on the downstream side of the island, as you go into the horseshoe feature on the river left-hand side, there's an area in there referred to as Beaver, and there's a lot of rough, irregular, and just kind of notched rocks in there, and it is not a place that you want to swim through. There have been some injuries there, and so we want to avoid the downstream side of that island at pretty much all costs. Now, right now, you're probably thinking, why would I want to run this rapid? Well, if we really slow down and look at where the water is going from the top and bottom, specifically out of Phil's, you'll notice that most of that water is trending back after the Phil's Hole feature towards that river left-hand side in what we refer to affectionately as the football eddy. And so if you have an unscheduled stop out of your boat, specifically at Phil's, what you want to do is you want to swim towards the center of the river and actually aim for the upstream side of the Horseshoe Island. And what you'll notice is that water, if you swim down towards the tip of the island, that upstream tip of the island, and swim down low on the eddy line, that eddy line will actually carry you all the way back to the far river left-hand shoreline. It's like a carousel. And so this is the reason why within the Keener program, we're so comfortable allowing the Keeners to actually go into fills for the big water desensitization that happens on Thursdays. Because once you've illustrated how to, number one, deal with the swim out of fills, and then number two, how to deal with the swim in football eddy. If you swim in really high, there's actually a feature called 7/8 hole, which is not one that you would want to swim through because it is so shallow. And then number two, it is another hydraulic. But then the other reason is this whole eddy line all the way down to basically where the island, the tip of the island is actually full of lots of whirlpools and boils. And that's an unnecessarily difficult swim to make if you swim in high into the eddy. Instead, if you swim low towards the bottom of the eddy, that carousel will carry you back upstream and you don't have to fight so aggressively. Now, thinking for the Sadler's feature, if we look at that feature while this loop is running, you'll notice that most of the water, and we'll highlight the tongue, is actually pushing towards the left-hand shoreline. And for most people, if they find themselves upside down after running through Sadler's, they'll actually find themselves in this eddy here, upside down in their kayak. And if the roll doesn't work out, and if for some reason safety is not right there to help you, you're probably going to end up in the lower Sadler's eddy as a swimmer. And in a worst case scenario, you're swimming down to football eddy. Those are kind of like the worst case scenarios. So with all that being said, we're going to start breaking down the different lines, but I felt like it was necessary to discuss the hazards here and then discuss where the most important feature that we need to be cognizant of as we're scouting is, which is the Horseshoe Island again. So as we're looking at this rapid, what I'm going to do is start kind of breaking the lines down from river left to river right. And we're going to basically talk about 4 more standard lines that individuals will run, and then we'll give some bonus lines at the very end. Starting on river left, we're going to look at the Sadler's Tongue line. And as we're scouting, you're actually going to kind of hop out on these rocks down at the bottom of the upper Sadler's eddy, and it's going to give you a really good view of the tongue, and especially on this outer rock, you'll see the tongue. It's very easy to see, but as most of you know that have been here, there is quite a bit of difference once you're in your kayak, especially at the top of the eddy.
Hot tips with Benny for McCoy's Chute. It's long. You get to the top of the rapid, you can't see the bottom. Go to the bottom. Scout that. Come up and use things on the sides of the river that are going to be very obvious when you completely change perspective and you're sitting in your kayak. Memorize those things and look for them. And the river features are the same. There's water moving through them and they surge and bubble and crash and break, but over time you can see consistency in them. So that is how you can go from scouting to sitting down in your kayak. Your eye level is much different and you can start to recognize things and start to know where you are and where you're going.
What I like to do is there's a big, tall, singular pine tree on the island on the kind of McCoy's Island there, and I like to use that as my initial angle. As I'm first peeling out of the eddy, I'm trying to make it to these rolling green waves, and then I'm pointing towards this big pine tree, and I'm just simply holding my position in those rolling waves. And as we get to that scouting rock, the water's going to pick up in pace exponentially, and it's going to really start pushing towards the left of the river pretty aggressively. And so what we want to do is continue to move our boat with a slight bit of right angle through here. And as we get to the top of the ledge there at the Sadler's Tongue, you'll notice that there's quite a slope as you go in. We really want to focus and get our shoulders forward in front of our hips. That way we're actively positioned in our boat, and as we go through, if at worst case we forget to continue tucking forward, we're sitting upright as we come through the tongue. Once we go through the tongue, we have a few options. You can either continue downstream, and if you have a lot of speed, sometimes you could find yourself over on the left edge of fills. Instead, what we want to do is we actually want to use either a forward right sweep or a small backstroke on our left side to turn our boat to the left, and we'll just avoid the left side of fills altogether. Now, at this point in time, you have an option to either catch the lower Sadler's eddy, or we can continue downstream to the football eddy, or last but not least, you have the option to continue working back towards the river right-hand side and work your way through corner wave and downstream through the horseshoe tongue into babyface. Now, all of these different options are great options. However, the one going through corner wave downstream through the horseshoe tongue is definitely the one of highest consequence because of the feature that we referred to earlier, which we are kind of referring to Horseshoe Island and Beaver as that no-go zone. And the reason why this is the most hazardous feature that we're coming across is if we again look at the water flowing out of fills and out of corner wave, it's all pushing towards the tip of the island. And so unless we have a fair amount of river right-hand angle and we're working aggressively to get across that current, you can get pushed over into that shallow area, which is an area we really don't want to be upside down or out of our boat in. So instead, if you're feeling pretty nervous about making that move, you have the option to catch the upper Sadler's eddy, move downstream into the football eddy, and from there you can actually run down the backside of the Horseshoe Island into the eddy down below Horseshoe. And this isn't a bad option at all. Some common mistakes, again, that happen with running the Sadler's tongue is just getting pushed too far left. And that is certainly better than getting pushed too far right. Too far right would put you, or working too far right would put you in kind of the deepest part of the hydraulic. But just to the left of the tongue puts you into this kind of curling, barreling wave that sends you upside down into the eddy. I do like this line a lot. I think it's a great way to challenge yourself with the mental aspect of how big the feature is, and visually it's intimidating. But again, all things considered, the actual hazard of this feature is pretty low given the fact that if you get pushed too far left, traditionally you're going to find yourself upside down in an eddy, which is pretty awesome. The next line that we're going to talk about is going to be called Thread the Needle. And what you're doing is you're essentially running between the Sadler's feature and the Phil's feature, and you're trying to thread the needle between the two big holes. Visually, it is potentially less intimidating than Sadler's, but in a lot of ways it requires a lot more boat control and ability to place your boat exactly where you want it to be. So what will happen is you're going to start in the upper Phil's eddy, and one of the more common mistakes is that individuals that will leave this upper eddy will actually leave at the very top of the eddy. And it's something that actually I think comes from a lot of beginner instruction where we're always encouraging individuals to leave from the top of the eddy because that's where the eddy line is narrowest and it becomes easiest to cross. But if we take into account the line that we're trying to do where we're cutting between Sadler's and Phil's, the higher up that you go, the harder the angle is to make between the two features. Whereas if you come out lower out of the eddy and then aim to hit this kind of reactionary wave that's coming off the right edge of Sadler's, we're going to then take advantage of the upstream moving current that's just behind the boil line of the hydraulic. We're going to then let our boat turn upstream and continue the ferry in between the two moves.
I always aggressively look where I want to go, and I aggressively do not look where I do not want to go. That's a huge one here at McCoy's Rapid. If I'm looking where I want to go, my overall body composition is helping me move myself and the kayak that I'm sitting in that direction. If I look to the right, my whole body is going to twist to the right, and there's a chain reaction that's going right down, and it's your body is trying to twist your kayak to the right. If you're looking right and trying to get left, you might make it, you might not, you might go into fills. So I like to think about the downstream shoulder. That's my favorite thing when I've tried to challenge, look where you want to go, don't look where you don't want to go. I started noticing that my shoulder that was downstream, when I would take the left stroke, if I'm trying to go right, I would really point my shoulder towards my goal, towards my target. I'm trying to go left, and I look right as I take the stroke. My whole upper body changes a lot of degrees to face where I don't want to go. Chain reaction into the kayak.
Now, just like the Sadler's line, you have a few options once you've aced your line through thread the needle, and you can continue all the way to river left as your momentum's already taking you there, and you can end in the lower Sadler's eddy. You can also choose to end in the football eddy on river left as well, or because you're already at the left side of Phil's, you have the option to start going ahead and ferrying back to the river right hand side, and you can either choose to catch the eddy at the photo video eddy, or you can go down through corner wave and downstream from there. The next line that we can discuss is the Phil's tongue line, and this one in a lot of ways is probably the most intimidating, but it can also be the easiest one as well, which is hard to believe. As we're looking downstream here of the upper Phil's eddy, you're going to notice that there's some waves that are up here. And the first of the waves we actually refer to as Hero Wave, and it's an incredible surf wave for those that are comfortable with the move. And downstream of that, we have some additional waves, and this whole group of waves now we're going to refer to as the marker waves. And what happens is you have a number of different reactionaries here, and there's a low point. And this low point that I'm going to highlight between those reactionary waves, it lines up almost perfectly with the Phil's tongue. And so that low point, when I'm sitting in that upper eddy scouting with guests, I'll actually refer to it as the saddle. And I'm encouraging them to put their boat actively on top of that saddle. Now, as you can see, these waves are crossing currents. And so if you stop paddling, the bigger waves in this section here, they're actually trying to push you left. And so the most common mistake with this line is if you get on top of those saddles and then you stop paddling, those bigger waves are going to start pushing you further and further left, and you may end up in left side fills, which can be a surf. So what we want to do is when we get into the saddle, we actively want to hold our position. We're paddling over those waves, and then as we go through Phil's tongue, the same rule applies as at Sadler's. We want to have an aggressive posture. Our shoulders should be in front of our hips, and we should be attacking the tongue, ready to take that big stroke into and through the tongue as well. All right. As you finish the Phil's tongue line, this is probably the easiest line to, number one, rally to the photo video eddy, or to rally down into the corner wave eddy or downstream from the rest of the rapid, because you're just physically further right off the bat. And so as we finish the lower half of the rapid, it becomes much easier to run those corner wave waves into the downstream tongue at Horseshoe. However, if you come through the tongue and you decide that you would like to, the water is still pushing towards the football eddy, and the path of least resistance is to the football eddy.
Once you've moved through the classics, is to run from the Sadler's tongue to the tongue of Phil's. I really like running this line because I love approaching a rapid perpendicular to the current, sideways, with the bow pointed to where I'd like to go, because as I am approaching and looking towards where I think is going to be the best place to start making a move, I have a lot. I can move backwards a little bit if I don't think I'm quite there, and I can really generate a lot of momentum. In this case, it's going to be left to right momentum, and I love trying to dial in how big of a chunk am I going to take of Sadler's.
We'll start in the upper Sadler's eddy, or just moving downstream through the tongue, and using the same markers, using the same idea as the Sadler's tongue. We're trying to find that same place, and so we're going to use all of those same markers. But as we go through the tongue, instead, what we want to do is we want to have a slight bit of left to right angle as we go through. And as we do, our goal is to try to catch this little bit of upstream moving current that we used for thread the needle to cut across the rapid with. As we use that upstream moving current, we need to have a good upstream angle, and we need to start ferrying, because again, all this water is trying to shed and push us to the left. And so we're actually working against where the water's wanting to go. And so as we ferry across, we have to have an aggressive upstream angle, and we're rallying hard. And as we get down into the saddle of these waves, we're going to turn downstream, and then we'll actually find our way down the Phil's tongue. And these are kind of the 4 main standard lines that most individuals will run. There are some bonus lines here as well for this upper section, and one of the bonus lines is the Far River right-hand line at Phil's. And so what you can do is you can start in the upper Phil's eddy and run down the Far River right-hand side, and that will take you downstream. There's something to consider is there was a storm a few years ago, and there are a number of trees that are down on that side. So this is not a line that I would actually recommend doing currently. I know that there are some individuals that choose to do it, but this is not one I would do because of the nature of the riverbank with the down trees right at the edge of the river. The last of the bonus lines that we can talk about right now, or that I'm going to talk about right now, is what we refer to as the Sadler's Boof. What's happening here is you have a curling wave that's kind of coming off the tip of the island. What you would do is you would run down beside the scouting rock there at Sadler's, and you would probably be somewhere about 8 to 10 feet off of it, and you'd be moving right to left across the rapid. As you get to that curler wave at the top of the island, what's going to happen is you'll want to put your boat on its right edge, and you're wanting to allow the water to turn your boat. As the boat starts to turn, basically what you're looking to do is reach down deep with a big right-hand boof stroke and a transition to your front left edge. This is, again, just a bonus line. This is not something that is really considered a standard line, but it is one that is a lot of fun if you're looking to work on a deep carving boof. This is a good line, and I'm a big fan of this one personally. So we've talked about the top half of this rapid pretty thoroughly, but what we need to do is we need to slow down and look at the bottom half of this rapid. And we've already discussed that most of the water leaving Phil's is pushing towards river center and actually trending back to the river left-hand side because of the nature of how the river is bending. Your path of least resistance as a kayaker is to follow where the current's going. And so if you're not feeling super confident with your ferries, if you're not feeling super confident moving your boat across aggressive currents, the path of least resistance, regardless of the line that you take, whether it's the Sadler's tongue, the Phil's tongue, or the thread the needle of those 3 standard lines, the path of least resistance is certainly going to the football eddy. When we look at football eddy, again, it's a giant carousel, and if we come in really high into that eddy, there's a lot of currents moving on, and that really football eddy is actually a couple of different eddies. There's an upper eddy that's below these rocks here, and then there's a lower eddy as well with some rock shelves in between. And so there's a lot of different moving currents here, but the lower you are, the closer towards the tip of the island, but still on the upstream side of the island you are, the easier it becomes to cross through some of that eddy line, especially if your intention is to go to the back side of the island. If you've decided that you want to follow the path of least resistance down to football eddy, what we want to do is kind of work our way to the center of the eddy, and then we're going to turn our boat as if we're trying to ferry for the tip of the island. We're going to ride the current downstream and actually find ourselves going down the back side of the Horseshoe Island. If we continue watching at where the water's trending, that center wave actually trends right towards the tip of the island. If we watch that wave and just kind of the water and track it downstream, it goes straight towards the tip of the island. And if we look at corner wave and the eddy there, and we watch that water, it will actually be trending more towards left side Horseshoe. And so if we just simply float, we're going to either get pushed towards the tip of the island or left side Horseshoe into Beaver, and that's kind of the area we don't want to go. Instead, what we want to do is we want to have that right-hand angle. We want to be using big forward strokes. We want to be creating momentum and moving our boat from left to right across the rapid.
From the football eddy, there is a very big chunk of current. The chunk of current that feeds the football eddy wraps around and starts moving back upstream. I like to go up to the top into the 7/8 hole. That's a very fun move, a nice S-turn. I move into the backwash, the toe back of 7/8 hole. That lets me look back upstream and start building up some momentum to surf the wave to river right of 7/8 hole. And from there, you're just trying to surf that wave as long as you can. If you're just going to tongue of horseshoe, which is what we're talking about, you don't have to max out that surf. You can just grab a surf, come down, grab the next surf, come down, try to grab the last one. There's about 3 waves in there. As soon as I'm where I want to be, I let my shoulders come downstream, which is going to pull my boat downstream in the grain of the current. Pop, pop, pop.
We're going to talk about the very bottom of the rapid, horseshoe here, and ultimately left and right side horseshoe at this flow, they very much are hydraulics. And with that, there are some shallow spots there that we want to avoid. And so as I go through here, I do try to find myself on the tongue. And really one of the biggest reasons I like to be on the tongue there is because it allows me to catch some speed, and then I'll have speed as I go through baby face, which has a really nice launching point as well, especially if you're in a half slice. McCoy's is a fantastic rapid, and I am definitely biased. I think it's one of my favorite rapids on the river personally, but I wanted to show it some love, and hopefully I've provided maybe a new or different perspective on this rapid to you. And if I have, I would love to hear what that new perspective might be. So if you could leave that down in the comments below, that would be really cool. I would love to hear if you learned something new about this rapid and these features. But again, I think one of the most unique things about looking at a big rapid like this is looking at it top down and isolating the different features, looking at what's happening with the water, and just understanding where the water is going and how to work with it. But yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up now. So we're going to cut away from the eye in the sky, and I'm going to come back to you now.
Hi, Nelson.
I hope that this video was helpful to you, and if it was, please consider giving it a big thumbs up. If there was something in particular that you took away from this video, please leave it in the comments down below. I would love to see where people have felt like they were increasing their knowledge base on this rapid. And last but not least, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please consider doing so, because I'll continue making weekly content through the rest of 2023 and potentially into the future. For those of you that have been providing such great feedback and positive vibes through this entire process, I just want to say thank you. It has definitely kept the fuel for the fire of these weekly videos, and it has become a lot busier this time of year, so I really appreciate that positive reinforcement and that positive feedback through this process. So thank you, and we'll see you next week.